Welcome to Making It Happen, a career in the performing arts, where we discuss how to break into the performing arts industry for yourself or your child, teen, or young adult. Guests include artists, creatives, casting directors, musical directors, choreographers, agents, and managers, as well as parents of young professional actors, singer, dancers, all who are passionate and share my vision of helping talented individuals land professional representation and have successful careers in the arts. My name is Lisa Solak, and I am the CEO and founder of Making It Happen, a career in the performing arts, having helped hundreds of clients break into the business on stage, in films, television, commercial work, and more. This podcast is supplemental to my groundbreaking online courses, Professional Kids and Teens 101, a primer for parents, and Professional Biz 201 for young adults, college students, and graduates. For more information, check out all the ways that you can benefit from my courses, programs, my free weekly newsletter, and free guides. Go to lbctalent.com. My guest today is Karla Garcia. I don't usually start here, but I'm going to start with the Tonys. Oh my gosh. So excited that you got to do that. When I heard about it, I was on cloud nine for you because that was such a big thing. And I think because here was a year that was so perfect for someone like you to break into that space, because there was no words. It was all about the music and all about the movement, and you got to do that. So talk to us a little bit about, tell people what that was like, how you landed in that space, and what it was like, the experience of casting the dancers and going through the process with Ariana.
For sure. Oh my gosh, it was so thrilling. It was fast and furious. I was doing a couple projects at the same time, so it was quite stressful, but in an exciting way. This was a moment where I felt like could be a game changer for me, not just with future opportunities, but just something I have never experienced before. Like you said, like breaking into a space like that people wait years for the opportunity for, and I was so grateful. Ariana DeBose, who I've known as a peer. I mean, like we have been through the trenches together, auditioning for shows. And then obviously now she's an Oscar winner, and she's on another level, but she has always been supportive and appreciative of my choreography. And it's something that I've noticed throughout the years, that every time I see her, she's checking in, what are you working on? And I mean, she has danced for me in a couple pieces before, before West Side Story. And so like we have shared space in this dynamic before, obviously not on this level, but I think that I really felt her trust, and the fact that she called me. She could have called anybody, and she wanted to gauge my interest. I think there were still some other ideas about who could choreograph this year, and I expressed to her that I would be honored and really excited to take on that opportunity. She told me that she loves the way I can tell stories through dance, and I appreciated that. And in a year that's what the task would be, like I felt that I was up for it. So then they brought me on the team, and then a few days later the Tonys were technically canceled. There was articles that came out that the writer's strike would prevent the Tonys from happening. So I wasn't sure if I would still be involved. And then it went back and it was happening again, but then I wasn't sure if I was involved, so it was a lot of back and forth. And I think in that moment, I just was happy and grateful to have been asked. So I knew that it would happen again at some point in another way. And I just decided to like move on about my way, about my schedule. But then they happened, and like it was thrilling, and we had 2 weeks to find dancers. Ariana and I were very aligned with the people we wanted to be a part of it. Obviously we have similar circles. We have similar taste, I think, and that was a big reason why it worked so well, our collaboration. And I think for someone like her who brought me on, who has not done this before, there's a big level of trust that came into play when it came to collaborating. She obviously had a lot of ideas on the grander scheme about what we could do with this piece, and she welcomed my ideas as well to riff off of what her plans were. And so that's the best type of collaboration, I think, in an opportunity like this. So yeah, and then we thought about dancers. Obviously she had a lot of experience with people from the West Side Story movie and just over years of like knowing lots of people. And I knew the same dancers, and again, like the tastes aligned, and we just wanted to have the right energy in a space. You know, that's a big thing that I think is a make or break when it comes to creating, especially for my process, and I know hers as well, is that we want the energy to be right. It's a stressful situation, you know, you just want good vibes.
Mm-hmm.
Me personally wanted to feel very supported by people who I've known for a while or who have shown up and always been there creatively, personally. You know, it was a moment of like I needed people there who I felt safe around. And I think that was a big factor when it came to asking the right people to be a part of it. And they knew my choreography very well, either people who have taken class or have been a part of projects or who I'm married to. You know,
Yeah.
so it
Mhm.
is important that we all spoke the same language, because it made the process smoother. And there were a couple of people who I hadn't worked with before, but who I just felt it was right. And you know, and so we wanted to pay tribute to Dancin, the show, and you know, did a little nod to them in the
Mhm.
beginning that I thought was really
Mhm.
important,
Yeah.
and asked a few of those dancers to come on board. So yeah, and I think that I had a visceral like experience because I just felt like it was such a new day for me, and like I was nervous, you know. I worked really hard to front load a lot of the work, and like I did a lot of pre-pro and I did a lot of that because I also have been an associate for the Tonys before. So I knew what the process was like.
Oh, that makes
And
it
I
easier.
yeah, like, and so I actually knew the team, like I knew the director and a lot of the producers from my experience being on the Tonys a year and a half before it. Like I danced in it and I was associate for Sergio when he had choreographed it.
All right.
So that, yeah, so that was helpful. But again, it's just such a different dynamic when you're the one in charge, you know, and
Yeah.
um so like to step into those shoes. And you know, I had told Sergio about it when I got the opportunity, and he was so supportive, and I just wanted to ask him for the best advice because you know I wanted to make him proud, and I also wanted to know what he thought was important. And you know, he had great things to say. He was like, make sure your shots are all set, make sure you tell them what you want, and plan that ahead of time. And that was really really useful. And then Ariana just, you know, like that's a lot of pressure on her too, to not just bring someone who has never done it before on board, but to host in a year that there was no, you
No
know,
script.
writing. Yeah. And so to trust me and herself to just take on that star role and just dance her face off, which
Mhm.
was so thrilling to watch too, because she is a rock star, you
Yeah.
know, and she can carry a whole number with being the lead dancer in a piece. And so I will say, to wrap it all up, is that I think I've wanted an opportunity like that, obviously, like a lot of people want that, but I am so grateful to have been given that in a year like this, where,
Mhm.
like you said, you know, like it was important that dance led everything. And so the stakes were even higher, but I'm just like all about seizing that and enjoying that. And I think when I spoke with the dancers, it was like, let's enjoy this power. Like, this is a lot of power that we have, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Like, let's enjoy it because people forget that dancers are are powerful. Like what we do can move audiences.
Mhm.
And I think the industry on the night of the Tony Awards is usually, you know, like it's a lot of inside jokes a lot of the times.
Mhm.
It's a lot
Yes.
of very exclusive things that we talk about, which is wonderful because it's like, you know, we have such a special community that has such a specific, like, niche way of telling stories.
Sure.
But this was a moment where it's like, oh, let's invite anybody and everyone who can just appreciate dance, you know, and dance is so global right now, in the past decade. Let's invite them into our industry in this way.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so to be a part of leading that is really special. So I'm very grateful.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And I love that you know, a lot you said a lot there in regard to just somebody new coming into the space, because there's so much that goes on with how you are in a room, whether that's an audition room or whether that's a rehearsal space. And there are a lot of people out there who feel a little bit entitled once they graduate from college or from different programs, and they feel like, you know, I'm perfect for this, why shouldn't I get it? And I think there's this space of like, okay, understand that you need to be nice to everyone, that you need to be
Yeah.
supportive, that you need to have your eye on the director all the time and your focus on what their goals are, not what your goals
Yeah.
are as an individual. So there's a lot of that that people need to learn when they're first coming out of school and they start to audition. And it's interesting that you say that here you were in a situation where time was limited, you know, and
Mhm.
stakes were high. And the
Yeah.
thing to do is to do exactly what you did. Bring in people that you know, bring in people that are going to be on your team and to be working toward your goals and not trying to interject things that maybe aren't going to be helpful to the end goal, you know. And those are things that I
Yes.
deal with clients who, you know, they're trying to navigate the audition space. They're trying to navigate the networking space and how do I
Yeah.
get it, you know, and all of that. And certainly that has to do with finding the right classes to take and the right
Yeah.
choreographers to work with and all of that, and to develop these relationships. And certainly this was so important to you in that moment that you had those people, you know, and that Ariana had them as well. And the fact that the two
Yeah.
of you worked together and could collaborate, it literally was the stars aligning and a perfect storm for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you said was so key because I think, you know, I teach a lot of class, I teach class in the city and I meet a lot of dancers and I love it. And I love that's the first step for me is when people show up to class, I know that they're interested in my work. Like that equals that to me. Like I'm like, oh, like so and so was in class or they've come a few times like so I know that they find something valuable about what I'm saying each week. And you know,
Mm-hmm.
they don't have to come each time. Like class is expensive, I know that as well, but at least I can see people want to be in my space.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that every relationship is a different fit, you know, like it's not always going to align, like you said. And that's okay. That's why we have a variety of stories that we're telling. That's why we have
Exactly.
different creative teams. And so I think that's also a part of the releasing the privilege, releasing the why didn't I get this or whatever. It's just understanding that like not all spaces are meant to be occupied by the same people, you
Exactly.
know, and that's what's going to make this industry more colorful
Mm-hmm.
and rich. So it's just knowing yourself and where you gravitate towards and what fits. And I think that's really
Absolutely.
important.
Absolutely. And I think new people coming into that space need to try all the different choreographers. They need to explore what's going on at the different,
Yeah.
you know, dance spaces in the city when they first arrive. That's super important to them. So I was going to talk about this later, but I have to ask you. So your style is so unique. I just adore it. Like if I was young
Thank
again, I
you.
would be in all your classes and wanted to be dancing with you. And there's, you know, you have this uncanny way of obviously emulating the music and all of the innuendo and the nuance of the music, which is so
Mhm.
cool. But it's
Thank you.
also just such a cool, like almost an urban feel to it. And I
Mhm.
also noticed that you have this really uncanny ability to choreograph this percussive movement along with these sustaining moments that are almost very, and maybe this is the wrong way to say it, but sexual in a way. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
provides this like this kind of, it draws you in to that
Mhm.
that kind of, I don't know what the words are, but anyway, I wanted you
Yeah.
to, in your own words, describe your style. Like, do you have,
Oh,
because it's different depending on what music. Like, I've watched all of your
yeah.
videos. I watched them all before the interview to just refresh my memory. And obviously, they're all different based on the styles. I was looking at your shorts. Everybody
Yeah.
go to her website and watch her short videos of her choreo. It's
Yeah.
just refreshing and amazing. And it's going to make
Thank
you all want
you.
to take her class. Um, but yeah, can you describe that and maybe the metamorphosis of your style, like where it came
Yeah.
from and how you landed where you are today? And I'm sure it's going to morph more and continue to change and grow, but where were you and how did you get from there to here?
Oh, I love it. Yeah, thank you so much for appreciating that. Like, you just described it so well. Yeah, I'm very musically sensitive. My dad was a guitarist and pianist and musician, and so music is the number one thing that inspires me
Mhm.
to move and to create. I know that's different for some people. Sometimes it's idea work, sometimes it's, you know, scene specific, set specific, but to me it's the music and
Mm-hmm.
how that can color and dictate an emotion or an environment. And so on the minuscule level or on the grand level, like it can just tell us so much, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I feel like with my short films especially, like I love creating stories in that way because it starts with a piece of music. Like when all of those short films started from a piece of music that I heard, and I was like, okay, how is this making me feel? And then how do I want to move? Why are we moving? And what are the characters we want to bring this world to life with, you know? And so
Mm-hmm.
that's where it starts for me. I think that percussion, I love horns, I love drums, and I think that each of them have different personalities. And so how they could provide, like you said, that sexuality, like horns or even piano bass, like bass is very mysterious and
Mm-hmm.
sexual to me. They all have their own different quirks. And that is what dictates how I move my body. And like you said, you know, like the layers of the different instruments on top of each other, to me that I can see like different pictures evolving based on what the music is doing. Of course, I do think that there is a it's kind of a less is more thing. It's quality over quantity. Like I think there should be the right amount of
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
movement for each instrument. You know, sometimes what I've seen, like my musical taste is very selective when it comes to where are we moving when for the different instruments, because I want it to be impactful when it does
Yes, I can
happen,
see
right?
that. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and in terms of like how I develop or how my vocabulary has morphed, I think morphed is like the right word because it's constantly evolving. Like
Mm-hmm.
every day that I'm living, like I feel like I have a new, you know, layer of inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even have to, I don't think about it. Like it just washes over me, whether it's
Yeah.
something I watch, you know, something I
Yeah.
or a class I take or something like that. And that's definitely how it began. I mean, I was a competition kid growing up. You know, I studied at a dance studio in Maryland and we did tap jazz ballet, all the things. And then I went to college and I majored in dance, and it was a whole nother world because we were doing modern and, you know, classic, postmodern. And I was at Tisch at NYU. And what I think that did for me was expose me to people from different backgrounds, people who had gone to art schools growing up and who had the modern temperament, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and and I mean, I'm like a sponge. Like I even now when I take class, I feel like I can still mimic in a way that works for my body, and I'm constantly like learning and evolving as a mover. So
Mm-hmm.
college did that and colored on top of my tap jazz ballet let me understand, oh, how am I working in less of a commercial way and
Yes.
more of movement for movement's sake, you know?
Yes,
And
absolutely.
which is concert world, like it's like I worked with Kyle Abraham, Bridget Moore, like some of the people who were MFAs who I danced for, that was more of the education I got than from my actual professors who I really love and adore. But it was working with these new types of movers who were doing a new age modern and West African influence and hip hop, you know, like it was all grounded in a modern type of movement. So that colored over on top of my commercial mindset. And you know, college for dance, that is what it is. Unless you're going to a commercial dance program, like you are studying your art for art's
Mm-hmm.
sake. Like you are
Yes.
diving in there and you're not, you know, trying to be in a music video. You're literally like, let's talk about how your body moves, you know. And that has its own, like it was eye-opening. Just that's a whole nother conversation, like college for dance, you know, because I was shocked. Like I was like, oh, where are my jazz classes, you know? I feel like
Yeah.
that's how a
Yeah.
lot of
No, no,
people
it's
come
good.
into
No, this is
school.
what people need to hear though. You know,
Yeah,
I think
it's
it's
culture
important
shock.
that that whole college experience is important to open up other doors and other opportunities for them to see and understand other means of movement, exactly what you're saying. And not everyone sees that as being important to do.
Absolutely. And I was one of those people, like I remember like being in it. When you're in it, you don't really understand why you're there. You're like, what am I doing? I'm, you know, where's my jazz class? Where's my tap class? But really, it's like in hindsight, I look back, especially now that I'm choreographing, I'm like, oh, that's why that happened, was because now I have such an understanding and appreciation for that type of movement, and composition, like how you know how you compose things,
Mm-hmm.
you
Mm-hmm.
know. And I think that I didn't understand it then, but this is very much a like looking back at
Mm-hmm.
my years, and also being able to work with people from different backgrounds, like if from coming from all different walks of life, you know, not
Mm-hmm.
everyone's a
Mm-hmm.
jazz kid from a competition studio,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
having that type of communication and like, you know,
Yeah,
again,
and
I
you know,
wasn't.
sorry,
Mhm,
the storytelling piece of it, creating focus, learning
mhm,
like what that means, creating the pictures, you know, all the things that the modern space teaches us too, and being more grounded, I think, and more
yeah.
about that and not about a focus being on winning a competition and who we're going up against.
Yes. Well, and I think that's what it is, because I came from there, and I came, which is also valuable. You know, I came from like a studio where it was like, okay, great, you're going to go to New York and you're going to be on Broadway. And that was always like the end goal. But because I wanted like I needed structure. I needed a grace period. I needed to be in academic land for, you know, I needed that those few years. I think that it's unsettling for us to come from such a commercial training ground and then to be like, wait, okay, but how do
Mhm.
I win? What's the
Mhm.
end product? Why am I
Mhm.
doing this? And I think if you're going to study dance or any art, really, you have to just let yourself like release and feel the feels, go through the training, and without any kind of end product in sight, other than the fact that you're going to learn a lot. Yes, we all need to make money. Yes, we have to have a plan and a business plan and everything. And I think that's important. But I think if you just allow yourself to be like, okay, what is this? What kind of creative mind am I going to be when I get out of here? Because it might spur other things about you. You might be more into business arts administration. You might
Yes.
want to like put together a company, like who
Mhm.
knows, you know.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard though. It is hard, like, you know, when for ambitious people coming in with not seeing like an end goal is really tricky. But if you have the resources and the opportunities to study your art, then I think that like entering it with that and I wish that I did more, because I was impatient a lot of the time. And then it took me a second to like release and be like, oh well, I'm here, let's just like let's be in people's pieces, let's see what
Try to
inspires me, you
enjoy
know.
it. Yeah, try to take it all
Yeah,
in, relax. Yeah. Mhm.
exactly. So then by the end of my last year, I booked my first Broadway show. It was a show called Hot Feet. It was an Earth, Wind and Fire musical. And
I
Sam
remember
Selena
that.
was in it. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Supposedly one of the worst shows like ever to be on Broadway, which there's truth to that. But it was my Broadway debut. It was my first time, you know, like getting my equity card and all this. So that was my entrance into the theater industry. And then from there, I did Wicked, I did Adam's Family, you know, so I was doing different types of choreography. And I think after college, having worked hardcore commercially in these theater productions, you
Mhm.
know, that was another layer of washing over me. Like the type of Wayne Salento movement in Wicked pitted against like the quirky Sergio Trujillo movement of
Mhm.
Adam's Family.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, these were all like very close together too. They were only a few months or a year in between. And so I remember being really inspired by the different ways of moving. And while I was doing these productions, in between when I didn't have a show I was in, I would be teaching. Like that was my side job. And the
Sure.
teaching, either in Jersey or, you know, in Westchester or in Connecticut, that was my way subliminally that I was developing my choreographic voice. Like
Of
teaching, I
course. Yeah.
mean, you know
Yeah.
how it is. Like it's like
Mhm.
even on kids who, you know, are just learning a class combo each day, like I'm learning how to run a room. I'm
Yes.
learning how to navigate personalities,
Yes.
also create content like
Mhm.
each week. And
Mhm.
I would get really inspired when the kids loved the choreography, when they were excited, you know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
that was my first taste of like, oh, people can appreciate what you create. Like that, even in its smallest sense, was the bug. Like, oh, this is cool. Like, let me just keep going, you know?
Mhm.
And again, like not everything, like it's hit or miss sometimes. Like sometimes you have to write drafts. And I think that was the thing that I learned in teaching and starting to choreograph for competition studios or starting to, you know, showcase my work in New York City. Like you have to just I've never had a problem with just trying something out and then showing it. I know that it's scary, but I feel like as long as it's authentic, then it's going to be your truth and it's going to be 100% you unapologetically. I think the moments that I was getting in trouble was when I would try to be like other people.
Yeah.
Because it was trendy, or it's like you could see that, yeah, people liked it. And then I would try to be sort of carbon, and I wouldn't fully try, but subliminally I was like, oh well, they're responding to that, you know, let me try to move like that. And that's never a good way to enter, you know, creatively, because it's not you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I love that. I love that you said that, because when you're in a room and you have to do choreo and your time is limited and you're trying to navigate the room as far as like just kind of controlling children, teens, people who want to put in their 2 cents, like learning that's a huge part of it. That navigation of the room, which you mentioned, is cool. And when you're time constrained and you're trying to choreograph and you want to write, I know I used to love to just write on people in the room. Like I love to kind of have a skeleton in my head for whatever the story was, know all the beats and what I wanted to hit, and then come in and be like, I just need to create on these people. And sometimes I would just create the movement and it was very loose and it wasn't specific for a certain section because I knew where I wanted people to be just visually, but I wasn't sure what I wanted them to do. And then other times it would be more specific. And I just love that because it felt so magical and creative and collaborative with the dancers. But sometimes that is hard to do because of time constraints. When there's no problem with time, I found I could do that. But if there was a time constraint, there was this planning piece that you had to do ahead of time. So with your methods in that regard, do you tend to create the choreo ahead of time and then go in and adjust it? Or do you enjoy just creating on people?
I think a little bit of both. I think it depends on the scenario, you know, like with the Tonys, when I know who I'm working with, I totally am naturally inspired. Like Kevin popping up from the piano, like I'm like, he's going to do that. It's going to be great. David over here, you know, like Carly over here. Like, it's like when I know exactly who we're working with, I can be inspired by them, simply just them, like, you know, because like you said, it's a collaboration, and it's like directing. Like a lot of the times you just want to let people do what they do, and then guide that and put your own stamp on it. Like I think there's a nice marriage of having people shine. And especially in my work, I think that like I love to work with people, and my work shines the most when they can bring a lot to the table. When they bring a lot to the table, then I can set parameters on that and then put my own spice on what they do. You know, like I think, and I'd rather do that. Yeah, I'd rather do that than spoon feed, because it's more authentic to the group, like that we're showcasing. And I'm definitely not saying like everyone make up the steps, but it's just, you know, you get to a certain point as a performer, and that's the people that did the Tonys. I think they're all at the point where they know who they are as dancers, as artists. Like they know what feels right. They know who, you know, like they understand themselves, and that's the best scenario, because then it's like, great, now we're all just being ourselves, and I'm going to give you the step, and it's going to look completely different on everyone, but it's going to be cohesive.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and so I think that it really depends. And then just to finish out like the influences, like I the last thing is that when I was younger, while I was, you know, performing in Wicked, I was very much socially in the like hip hop underground, like, well, not solely underground, but just the hip hop scene, and you know, the kind of like the collegiate hip hop scene and culture shock. I would go and teach there. Like I knew a lot of people, and I was immersed into that like underground battle freestyle scene.
Love that.
Not necessarily like me doing it, but I would go to House Dance Conference, and I would go and I would watch b-boy battles and like blocking, and I learned so much more about like foundational hip hop style that I felt like in another life, if I had started as like a hip hop dancer, I feel like I would have like really just soaked it all up from when I was younger. Because I have a video of when I was like 6 dancing to Marky Mark, like Good Vibrations, like doing like the Running Man, and I was like, oh my god, I loved it, wow, you know. And then I had just entered codified training like till high school, and I was very technical. You know, I went to the Kirov and Washington Ballet and everything. But like, there's something different when I take like a hip hop class, or I'm just around really raw type of movement that isn't codified. Like, it just feels right. Like, and I don't know if
Yeah,
it's
I can
something in
see
my
that in your choreo.
culture.
Yeah, I can
Yeah,
totally
like,
see that in your choreo. Absolutely. And you know, it's so hard because I think years ago the hip hop was not something that was equated with the other dance styles, and it wasn't something that was being done outside of the major cities for young people. So you couldn't go to a local studio and have that option to actually train in that genre, and now it is
yeah,
equated, and I feel like without it young dancers cannot be as successful even in the Broadway spaces, because it just limits
no
you. It
more.
adds another filter to the things that you can audition for and that you can do, because so much of it is not just a standalone genre, but is filtered into other genres as well. And segue to yours, because there's
Yes.
so much there that
Yes,
I
no,
see.
I absolutely love that you mentioned the filtering in, because whenever I don't even know why my class is still called theater, or why any class is called theater jazz or theater anymore, because I think that the genre of dance in theater is not even a thing. Like, it's like,
No,
what does that mean? Because
no.
there's just so much, and that's why the level of competition in terms of dancers in on Broadway is so high now, because, and which is great, because now we're just drawing from different types of dance, different camps, and you have like
Yes.
Kofesh with fiddler, you have the Peony and Mari, like bringing their people in, and specialized dancers like
Yes.
who do these specific things in these types of dance, which is wonderful, which is how Broadway should be. And
Yeah.
I think that, when I teach my class, like, I don't want to label anything. Like, I don't want, when someone asks like, well, what do you teach? Essentially, yes, like I am jazz trained, and I will always go back naturally to a technical jazz ballet foundation, because that's how I grew up, and I will always claim that. On top of that, I am influenced by so much, by contemporary and by hip hop. And I think that that is all fused up into a style that is musically sensitive, but I would never want to claim to say I teach street jazz, or I teach hip hop, or I teach, I just teach a movement that tells stories the way that I feel it tells them when I hear the music. And that has all of these different styles wrapped up in one. And I think that, like, once we start categorizing, like, we get in trouble a little bit. I do think that it is important to acknowledge like the different styles that we are coloring our movement with.
Sure.
Like I
Sure.
said, like, like foundational hip hop and jazz and tap and ballet. But I think I would never claim to, be teaching hip hop. Like, I'm like, but it has like you said, like the grittiness of it, or just, you can recognize, I love locking, I love how funky like locking is, and I love the footwork in breaking,
Yeah.
and like top rock, like, because, and I'm also a tapper, like I and that's like where those two things kind of blend a little bit, because it's rhythmic, and so
So in looking at your movement and seeing what's happened and what you've done, and really looking closely at it, and what you just mentioned about musical theater, we could call musical theater like classic musical theater class. Let's go to the old classic
yes,
musicals. That could
traditional
be,
musical
yes,
theater
there you go.
jazz.
Traditional musical theater jazz. Perfect. Yes. But what you're doing is your own. Like, I almost feel like, and I want to kind of bring this around to the whole the ad recently for Chicago, the Fosse thing.
Oh,
But
yeah.
which is very
So
cool,
random.
wild that
Yeah.
that happened. But I was going to mention Fosse because he has such a
Yes.
distinct style because of the isolated movement, and we
Yes.
all talk
I'm
about it and
definitely
study it.
influenced by him. Yeah, as
Yes,
well.
I was
Yeah.
just going to say, I see
Yeah.
that so much as
Yeah.
well in your choreo, but I feel like you're almost your own style. Like, I feel like you're developing, and you are like that new choreographer who is going to literally explode. Well, you already are kind of in that space,
Oh my
but
gosh. Thank
to be
you.
this person who has their own style. Like, is it going to be Karla? Is it going to be Garcia?
Right.
Like, is it going to be like,
Right.
what is it? Like Fosse became Fosse.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of, I'm older. I've seen a lot, I've been in,
Yeah.
close to the industry for a long time, but that's what seems to be happening with what you're doing, which is so exciting to watch and so exciting to see. And I don't know if you
Oh,
even
thank you.
realize it, but it's that
Well,
definitive to me.
oh, thank you. That means so much. I mean, I definitely I definitely think I feel empowered in just creating my own lane. Like, I'm just
Hmm.
like, let me just keep doing what feels right. Um, I do want to make sure, like I'm giving due where it's important. Like I said, like Fosse was a huge influence. I grew up, training ballet, tap, and jazz and traditional musical theater style, which also includes Fosse for sure.
Sure.
And so
Yeah.
the isolation is exciting to me, and it's definitely
Hmm.
ingrained in there. But then the isolation of locking or of that kind of, I really love that too, and I loved getting or and voguing, and that when I would take some classes and really enjoy that. That is now coloring with my influence of Fosse. And so I think that I'm not being revelatory in a sense that, like, but in the end, like, Fosse wasn't either. Like, he
Hmm.
took
Hmm.
he took from, Indian
Yeah.
dancing and,
Hmm.
so people before him and like different cultures. And I think it's important to me that I am doing what I feels natural to my body, which
Hmm.
is things that I'm excited about, the ways I hear music and how that makes me want to move. I always want to lead with that, and not like, oh, let me put a little bit of this in it, a little bit of this, so that
Hmm.
people can see what's in there,
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
it's
Yeah.
it's more like just leading with, like, oh, what was exciting to my body when I heard this piece of music. Oh, and you see sprinkles of these other things. And I think that's how we, as an industry, and this next wave of like dance leading the way, and like dance being more prominent in storytelling, is that we are just using all our different perspectives of how we think we can tell the story. Because I think that, like, how I create movement for my classes, like, it's very exciting and special to me, because it's a space that can be all mine, and that I can really share my perspective and how I create vocabulary, and people can respond to that. And that's different than when I'm working on a show, like a theater
Yeah.
show, and
Yeah.
I'm collaborating with a bunch of designers, which is so wonderful too. But
Hmm.
it is, you have to fit where you have to have dance fit properly. It's not going to be the same. And
Yeah.
having those two muscles, though, is really important to me, because then I could use my movement and vocabulary in ways that can be revelatory, perhaps, like that
Hmm.
can be like exciting and new and fresh. I'm working on Rent right now with Andy Senor Jr., who was one of the original angels in the Broadway cast, and he's directing it. And we're doing it in Aspen. And then the music director, Jared, has done a lot of productions of the original Rents. And so I'm working with my collaborators are very close to the show, and I've never worked on it ever. I've never been in one, I've never choreographed one,
Hmm.
but they were excited to have me on board, or Andy was excited to bring me on. And I told him in our first meeting, it is important to me that what I do is honoring, like, the original, or what you think is important about
Yeah.
this show, because you're so close to it. So
Sure.
that's really nerve wracking to me, and I want to just pay homage and do it justice, but I'm not a purist. I haven't been part of it. So I did a lot of pre-pro videos for him. And it's just such a massive show to try to do on the spot. Like, I work fast, but like, I need to have an idea.
Hmm.
So I've been doing a bunch of pre-pro and sending him like videos. And yesterday it was so like affirming, because he was like, Karla, it's exactly what I felt would be a breath of fresh air, new life pumped into it, but not like trying to be different.
Hmm.
Like, we
Hmm.
have all these revivals these days, and which sometimes it works. Like, sometimes it works, maybe not the whole show, but like, I appreciate people trying to move in a different direction. But he had said that the choreography is, it's pumping new life into it, and it's fresh, and it's something you haven't seen, but it's still honoring the relationships and what feels right for the characters. And now he can go in and just and sprinkle in the anchoring storytelling that he
Mm-hmm.
knows so well, which is
Sure.
honestly the best type of revival, I think,
Yeah.
like that
Yeah.
you have the right foundation and then you're doing something new that still like honors it. So that was like a really huge compliment because Rent is like the Hamilton of that time,
Yes.
and
Yes.
so
Absolutely. I saw the
but
original cast,
yeah.
and I'm thrilled that you're doing it. When I saw that in the information, I was like, wow, that is going to be something. Is it bound to come back to Broadway? Is that the goal?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, Andy sets a lot of this is his first time setting his own type of Rent. He usually sets the Michael Greif version, the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
original, in all of the different countries. And so he's
Mm-hmm.
done like a lot of different productions. So
Sure. So it's
I'm not
his
quite
first.
sure. Yeah, so it's his first, and we're gonna do it, and we'll be all the way in Aspen, but like I think there's something really exciting about working with his mind and like someone from the original team and who was in it, and
Mm-hmm.
that is a learning, like that feels valuable to me. This experience is gonna feel valuable because working with directors, that relationship is it's so important that
Yeah.
it's collaborative
Yeah.
and that I'm growing like while I'm there. Like, like
Mm-hmm.
watching him, to me, I'm segueing, but like to me,
No,
like
go ahead.
working with really smart directors, it is more valuable to me as a choreographer, watching them work and how they articulate intention sometimes than watching other choreographers.
Mm-hmm.
Because to
Mm-hmm.
me, like choreographers can have their own process in any way. And I think that we should have our own perspectives in the way that we do things. But to me, I love getting to hear directors talk and how they get an emotion out of somebody, or, because I think that's so helpful for me as a choreographer,
Mm-hmm.
how I communicate with actors, with dancers, and seeing things in a different way
Yeah.
is going to help bring my stuff and elevate my work
Mm-hmm.
too.
Yeah, of course, of course. So, yeah, let me ask you a question. So, I have been involved in a number of projects where choreographers are having to work for television and film, and
Yes.
that can be a whole nother animal. So, if there's someone out there who is, on the road, they want to be a choreographer, they want to move into this space, can you talk a little bit about the differences, maybe some specifics about preparation that would help
Yeah.
them if they are being asked to choreograph a friend's music video? They're being, they're just kind of starting out, because you can, and I have been in this space with top choreographers, top Broadway choreographers who moved into the TV space and then found that the shots weren't what they thought they were going to be. So what they choreographed that was so wonderful didn't really end up being what it was meant to be once it was
Yeah.
filmed and edited. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because you have had that experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's helpful too, like dancers and choreographers, like I've done a couple TV shows like Smash and as a dancer, and to be on set and like really understand um first of all, killing yourself like doing the same thing again and again,
Yeah.
and then nothing gets in the take. So that's when you just run back to theater and you're like, give me live theater so everyone can see everything.
Right.
And then the money is a completely different thing. I mean, like it's crazy how much money that industry has.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But artistically, like, and creatively, it is such a different beast. I think it depends on the nature of the project. Like I said, like I was talking about before about my short films, like I love getting to do that and produce my own work in that way, because essentially I usually work with a cinematographer who lets me take the space. Like I hire someone to capture everything exactly the way I would like. And if I trust them enough, usually I definitely do, they'll give me their ideas. Like I work with Pierre a lot, and he's so smart, and he's an actor and he's a director, and he'll give me ideas about shots or where we can go story wise that will elevate my work. I only want to work with people that will elevate each other,
Yes.
and I think that, but in that collaboration, I'm very clear with my short films that I definitely want to lead in terms of conception and in terms of focus and like how we're capturing the movement. So that's why my short films are a gift, because I'm like, this is all me, like in the
Mm-hmm.
way that I want it to be, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's why I have those films on my website, because it's authentically like everything how I would want it to be.
Sure.
And then when I'm hired, so this past year, I was hired as a choreographer for one of for the show Power, Raising Kanan. And there, it's not a lot of dance, but there was an R&B group and they needed movement, kind of like En Vogue, and it takes place in the 90s. So it's like 90s hip hop, like singer movement, which is super, super fun. And it's definitely like I'm a 90s kid. And I'm working with, they're fantastic. Like they're fantastic, but it's also like you don't have a lot of time with TV. So the prep for that, what I had requested was that I could go away with some dancers. I'm going to prep this on other people and then I'm going to send it and then I want your feedback. That to me is an efficient way of working, but I definitely have to ask for that. And a lot of the times, because they had never worked with a choreographer, they want to hear like what I need for the process. So that's a scenario where I was able to dictate what I think, or share what I think would be most helpful for the process. And it was very efficient. And then everyone got in the habit of like, okay, send us your previs and then we'll give you feedback and then we'll have a rehearsal with the girls. So that's how that went. I know it just depended on like the type of show and the team that you're working with. I know that's not always going to be the case where they are as flexible. Maybe it's a show like Glee or Schmigadoon, like Chris Gattelli, like probably has a lot to say about his process and how in a second season, kind of has a rhythm. I remember working on Smash and Josh Bergas, I was on the second season. So by that point, he had a rhythm with like, okay, they give me a pre-pro and we do the thing and the stuff.
Yeah.
So I feel like it is all dependent on the type of show, the amount of dance that's in it. But I think like my suggestion, and it's just how I work, I always love to get time by myself with my dancers to develop ideas and then show that to the team, get as much feedback as you can, also prefacing it with like, this is an idea. And I do this with the other shows too, but I think it's so helpful for them to see what you're imagining. And then in that previs, I will shoot it the way that I think it should be shot.
So smart.
And I did that with the Tonys as well. Like I think that it's helpful to have an associate or someone just like show them the possibilities, because we're visual people. Like it's like once the director, the producer sees what you're imagining, then you're halfway there, right? And then it's working with the DP. I think the Tonys like were a big intersection of everything I had worked on. Like it's like my short films, my TV stuff, and then my theater things once we got on stage. So in that process, the director Glenn, and the Steadicam guy, Tori, was fantastic. I mean, like so flexible, so quick, so understanding. And
he was amazing.
Oh my God. I don't even know how he ran down the stairs.
I don't know how he did that either.
Like, oh my God.
I was thinking that I watched
stressful.
Yeah, I watched it so many times and I was thinking, oh my gosh, he had one chance to do this.
Literally. And people thought it was pre-recorded. Like when people in the theater thought, because they saw what was happening outside in the lobby, they saw it on the screen, so they thought that was all pre-recorded and that we just started doing it live in the aisle. And I was like, oh, because it was so smooth.
It was amazing. It was crazy.
It was really smooth. Yeah. So I think heavy and smooth communication with the DP is so important. Like he or she is the one that's going to make your stuff either look really good or not,
Yeah. I have to ask you this. Relationships. So relationships and networking is so important. And this becomes a thread throughout all of the interviews that I've done on the podcast, because it's kind of tricky in the way you navigate that, right? So, and some people can be a little bit too pushy in that regard and they don't really know how to navigate. And it's important to kind of learn how to do that. So my question to you would be, how important from start to finish was networking for you and relationships that you built based on the way you acted and reacted and functioned in the various spaces that got you where you are today?
Oh, that's fantastic. That's such a great question. I think where I landed in each space, whether I was a performer or then associate choreographer and then choreographer, all happened incredibly naturally. Like, and this is my perspective, and I know that everyone is different. print. You know, even one of my mentors, Sergio, gets on me sometimes. Like, he's like, you need to know who the producers are. You need to talk to them more, and da, 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 da. And I think that I think there's truth to that, and I should be a little better about that. But I think there's also like me kind of going through this life, letting my work speak for itself. I really think there's power in that. And you know, whether that means in another universe, that if I was a little bit more aggressive with my networking, that maybe I would have gotten projects like quicker and sooner. I'm actually okay. I think quality of life and balance is really important, you know, and I think that the right projects are gonna come your way if they're meant to. I think that I've led with what I've always thought came natural to me, which is expressing through my work, whether that's through my classes, through my short films, um, and then eventually when, you know, projects were landing in my lap, it was because of those things that I was creating. I mean, to be honest, those short films I was making for myself. Like, I really, really was, and of course to build reputation, but I wasn't trying to like, I didn't have a direct specific director in mind or a project or like I was just like, this feels right, and I'm going to put it out into the world, and I'm going to show everyone who I am. And then once I do that, Darko Tresniak was interested in my work because it was so in line with the noir world, like that show that I'm choreographing, you know, or this other project felt right for the thing, you know, like, and I'm doing an immersive show in the fall where it's a speakeasy. So all of my videos that had like with the bar and the card playing and then the smoking and the whatever, you know, like they were like, oh, she understands the world. But it came so naturally that like the right projects came to me because of the work that I put out there. So that was when I started to choreograph. As a performer, you know, like I would just go to open calls, and then the hot feet, I went to an open call and my phone number was incorrect on my resume. And so they could not find me for the callback, and I was really bummed. And then they emailed me at an email that I didn't normally check, but I remember it was on my resume, and it was Paul Hart from casting, and he was trying to find me. And they had finished the callbacks, and I called him. I was like, sorry. And they saved me a spot in the ensemble because they liked Maurice Hines liked me from the open call so much.
That's amazing.
It's amazing, but it's not normal.
No. Normally they'd be like, we don't have a number. Oh, well, next.
Oh yeah, exactly. And so, you know, there are moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, if I had just like, you know, but again, like I think because I was meant to be in that show, or I was meant to meet these certain people, I think that I have also valued humility, and I want to treat people the way I like to be treated, you know, like I think it definitely always pays off. Well, not pays off, but I feel better when like I am treating someone the way that I would like to be treated, whether that's a student or a collaborator or you know, and
totally agree.
And I think that it comes back to you. Like it really, really comes back to you. Like, and and on top of that, like you're just a happier person. Like I feel like it's more joyful to like navigate the world and this industry in a positive way. And you know, okay, we're not going to get all the projects, we're not going to get all the jobs. You know, like you could really get stressed out about that, but then you just release it because like, well, maybe that wasn't supposed to happen. Okay, great. Let me go about my day. Let me choreograph for class. Let me finish this Netflix show I was watching. Let me hang out with my husband. Like, it's important to know what actually brings you joy. And that's not necessarily going to be, you got this job, because there's a lot of things out there that we're not meant to do. And, you know, maybe there's a reason for that. So I feel like networking is very different for everybody. I think being nice pays off. I can also, from the creative perspective and from a teacher's perspective, like it is quite obvious to me when someone is not being real.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't
You
think
know,
they
like,
realize that. Exactly. You just, and I love everything that you said, because it's so true that you just have to be yourself and be
yeah,
focused and be a part of the project in a positive way to help move
yes,
whatever it is forward, and be satisfied with being yourself in a room, whether that's an audition room, you know, or wherever
yeah, or
you
a
are
pre-pro
in an
room,
interview.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I absolutely like, and I think, you know, because I just, before we were speaking, I spoke with a creative team, just a potential project that I could be on, like a new musical, and it was exciting. But you know, like and they were wonderful. And if it works out, it works out. And once again, like I think we're all at a point, especially after the pandemic, where we should be intentional about the spaces we're in,
Mm-hmm.
and that is only going to make this industry richer, like because we'll be meaning to do something, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm fortunate enough that I have joy in other spaces that have nothing to do with me being hired, which is class, which is, you know, my own projects or my friends, my family. Like it's like there's just so much to enjoy that being asked to be a part of creative teams or big shows or whatever, like that's like icing. Like it's like,
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
great, you know, like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and hopefully it's a good project because
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of crap these days too,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's funny because that brings us back to what I was saying in the beginning, perspective. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yes,
having that
yes,
perspective and knowing yourself enough to make the right choices and be okay with things that maybe, you know, aren't right for you, you know?
absolutely. And I think that, you know, going back to like when I was in college and not really appreciating the space I was in yet and the resources, I think for young dancers and choreographers, it is important and valuable and natural to feel doe-eyed and the world is your oyster, and like let me like take all the classes. Like that is, go out there and like experience different people in different ways and see what you really feel excited about, you know. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's less about like, oh, who is going to get me somewhere.
Yes.
You know, like it's just it's like, what do you actually like to do? Because then
Mm-hmm.
that will really bring out the right part of you, like,
Mm-hmm.
and that might not look like what you thought it would.
Exactly. That is just
Yeah,
such great advice. And that's great advice too, because there's a lot of people that don't embrace their type. Like whether you're talking about a dancer, actor, or singer, they don't embrace their type because they haven't found themselves, because they're trying to be who they think everybody wants them to be. Even in the
yes,
audition space, they're, you know, obviously you're trying to, you know, be the character, or, you know, read the lines. And if you constantly are thinking about what do they want from me, what do they want it to be, you have to just be yourself and like give it your own take, make your own choices and be yourself. And if you're right for the project, you're right for the project. And if you're not, then, you know, you move on. And I love the fact that you
exactly.
also have found joy. And I love when you mention joy in creating your own art and creating your own things, and being able to have kind of that outlet for yourself artistically in between these other things. You know, I think that's important for people to understand, that it's okay to go out and create those things for yourself, because it's also
Yes.
going to put your art out there in the world, which is really what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, you know, like I want to continue to improve and morph and evolve like as a choreographer. And you know, like with the Tonys, I probably, there's probably choreographers or even my peers maybe who like don't agree with what I did, or like maybe they would do something different, you know, like who knows. But like I think that as we're all evolving, like it's great to have different opinions, like, and it's great to see things a certain way. It's like, you know, those in school, oh yeah, this is what it reminds me of. In school, like in art class, there like you get this like image and there's like different types of shapes.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it was the same image that everyone got, but then you can color it differently, and the shape that everyone popped out of it, like that they decided to prioritize, was so different. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my god, because everyone's seeing it like in a different way. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember that so well because I'm like, oh, how did you see it that way? How did you see it that way? And that's art. Like that's how, you know, someone's given a blank canvas. It's like, okay, this is what I'm going to do for the Tonys in a year that it's all dance. And I'm not gonna, the moment I feel like I'm trying too hard, that's a problem. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny that you say that too, because
yeah.
I find that when things are just kind of writing themselves, like when you're in that room and you're in that collaborative
Yes.
process and you're with the right people, things tend to just kind of, it almost feels like it's writing itself, and it feels right. It feels magical. It feels like almost like this divine kind of experience. I don't know if I'm getting a little too deep
Yes.
with
No,
that, but it feels that way.
absolutely. It
Mm-hmm.
feels like, okay, great. And then you let it breathe. Then you let it sit and you're like, great, that's what it's gonna be in this year, today, right
Mm-hmm.
now.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just trust. You have to trust yourself
Yeah.
and like just put it out there.
Yeah. 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 For
Okay.
sure. For sure. Carla, this has been awesome.
Oh, I had such a great time.
This is so great. I feel like
Your
we could talk
questions were
forever.
amazing. Have a great day.
You
Thank
too.
you
Enjoy your
again.
weekend. If you'd like to follow Carla to keep up with all that she's doing, follow her on Instagram at Karla Puno Garcia, and join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Need more information? Visit lbctalent.com or lbctalent.thinkific.com, and follow me on socials at LisaSolak_LBC Talent. By sharing our stories, we can help other talented individuals land the career of their dreams.